tell me a little bit about the journey. You said it was like 15 years between, like, how did you start your company? What was the impetus for that? What was your goal at the beginning? How'd that change? Anything you want to share?
I always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Always. I was never a good employee per se. I always had other ways of doing it. I look back on that chapter pre starting my own business though, and I there was definitely some immaturity and some growing up that needed to happen,
Uh-huh.
um, relative to what I expected for what I was willing to give. But it was just time. I was about 10 years out of college and had some really good experiences with some entrepreneurs, had some really bad experiences with some people some managers that, you know, I think some of the most powerful lessons we learn come from the experiences that are difficult.
Yeah.
So it wasn't that I had these beautiful role models and I wanted to be them. It was more like, oh man, I don't want anything to do with that. So I'm going to create my own thing. So after 10 years in technology, sales, marketing, um, you know, my first job straight out of school was with Dictaphone Corporation, actually selling
Oh, wow.
doctors and attorneys
Yeah, I was
door
a
to
I
door.
was a practicing lawyer for a few years, right at the end of the dictaphone kind of
Okay.
era, right? Yeah, oh yeah.
Brutal,
Yeah.
brutal. You had to come back with a certain number of business cards. And I mean, but it was good. It was good sales training. And anyway, went on to more sophisticated technology sales and sales leadership. And then it was just time. So I was a major geek about it, Jeff. I actually built a spreadsheet with across the top, I put all the characteristics of a business that I wanted.
Uh-huh.
Then down the left, I was evaluating the different opportunities that I was looking at. So I
So
had
you were coming because some people come at this from the perspective of, hey, I've got this great idea. You were coming at it from, hey, I'm a shitty employee. I better start my own business. And what is the business going to be? Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Okay,
that's
cool.
that's actually a really good way to put it. I just knew that there was something more for me. I was very driven, very financially driven.
Uh-huh.
I just knew that I wasn't going to be able to achieve what I wanted to working for somebody else. I was fortunate to have grown up and seen the entrepreneurial opportunity and was never afraid of it. So yeah, I just started quantifying opportunities. At the time, I was living in Fargo, North Dakota, after I
Okay.
met my husband, and
Uh-huh.
one of the key criterias was I knew we weren't going to stay in Fargo for forever, so I wanted a business that was transportable, that wasn't tied to specific geography. So
Gotcha.
anyway, had a half a dozen criteria, and I found a business in based in Texas that was providing licensing education through good old fashioned mail order materials. So literally, it had like five different licensed professions just in the state of Texas, and people would jump on their website and order materials, and they would ship them a booklet
Uh-huh.
in the mail, and
Uh-huh.
then the licensee would fill out their answer sheet and fax it in.
My gosh. Yeah.
And this gentleman lived in North Dallas. He had this beautiful home in this outbuilding where he had three employees, and he was just it was a great little business. But I could see early software as a service.
Yeah. So this is what year?
This is 2004.
Okay. So yeah, I would have thought a business like that would have already gone
Should
to a little more electronic
should
delivery.
have. It was, I'll
Yeah.
never forget what this gentleman told me. He said, Michael, I could run this business from a wheelchair,
Uh-huh.
meaning it was very safe. It was, he had a really nice lifestyle business. And so I think he looked at me as kind of a young whippersnapper with just too much risk to do
Uh-huh.
a deal together. So we didn't end up doing it, but as I kept going down my road looking for opportunities, I could not let go of that business model, which was e-learning was essentially software as a service. You create a course one time and you have no additional cost of goods sold every time you sell a
Right.
course.
Right.
And so you wrap the internet around the whole customer experience and then you scale it nationally. So that's essentially what I ultimately did was I started one in real estate. I grew up in a single parent real estate family. My mom raised all three of us selling real estate. I got my broker's license after my freshman year at CU Boulder. Was never a practitioner per se, but
Hmm.
understood it. Some real estate investment opportunities gave me the seed capital that I needed at this point to start my business.
Nice.
So just literally just dove right in and bootstrap startup from nothing. Um, so the business grew really, really nicely. I started with a business partner. My business partner was a CPA and an attorney by education, but really an entrepreneur as well. And so he played a back office role for me, doing my bookkeeping and any kind of legal work that I needed to do, as well as work with me on some strategic things for the first 7 or 8 years of the business.
Wow.
So it was the classic bootstrap startup kind of grind. And it grew into an amazing, incredible business where we led our space. Um, we ended up doing a really nice recap with a private equity firm out of Chicago at the end of 2020. After
Uh-huh.
having gone to market in 2019, I pulled that deal. I didn't like the soft aspects of the deal. The money was great, but we had a really strong set of core values in our business, and this initial offer just did not align with us from a core values perspective. So I pulled the plug on that deal, which was somewhat heartbreaking to my business partner.
Yeah, that's
We went
always tough.
Yeah, I mean, it was a classic case of listening to your gut
Uh-huh.
and knowing that what you have is amazing from a business perspective. And we never really needed a partner. It was just that, 90+% of all of our wealth was tied up in this business, and it made
Right.
sense to do a deal with somebody.
Right.
So we ended up waiting. COVID hit. Our business literally doubled when
Oh,
it
wow.
was all
Isn't
classroom.
that interesting how that
Yeah,
line
all,
for you?
all,
Yeah.
all classroom education shut down. And we ended up going to market about a year later and ended up with a purchase price that was twice our original offer.
And with people you felt more aligned with.
Yeah, the original deal was a strategic buyer that was going to have us as a division of another company
Uh-huh.
that they owned. And this deal, we are our own platform. So the opportunity to layer acquisitions on top of us, which is
Yeah.
what we've done in the last 3.5 years.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. So, um, you said the things that you learn, I think I don't maybe we were talking before the recording, like the things that you learn the most from were the difficult things, not the positive things. Like what were the difficulties? I mean, the way you described it is like we started the company, it took off, everything was amazing. What were the ups and downs in terms of like running the company that, maybe you learned through?
So I'm a big believer that the entrepreneurial journey is really the entrepreneur's inner journey.
Yeah.
They're not they're not separate. They're
Yeah.
very, very intertwined. So for me, my business partner is 10 years older.
Uh-huh.
He wasn't in it day to day. And his
It sounds like
position,
a different style than you, more the analytical guy, and you're like the visionary, right?
very different style. I was a
Yeah.
sales and marketing product culture guy, and my business partner was very analytical and numbers driven. And really, I learned at a certain crossroads that he really looked at his involvement as an investor, not
Hmm.
necessarily a business partner. So there was, the entrepreneurial journey is lonely. And so in that journey, you face your fears and your insecurities along with your strengths, and grit. And so for me, um, it wasn't necessarily that there were really terrible things that happened. We were fortunate from a timing perspective. We started this business, real estate education, in 2005. We all know what happened in 7 and 8, but frankly, we were a little bit oblivious to it because we just had our heads down and we were growing through it.
Uh-huh.
We're still growing through that economic downturn, but our monster competitors were pulling back. So it was kind
Uh-huh.
of this perfect storm of we were growing into it and they were pulling out, which allowed us to grab a lot of market share. So, I think the quote negative lessons probably came before I started my business, and that there weren't any like amazing. I had one really solid entrepreneur who I looked up to, But most of the other experiences with the leaders that I worked with were more around that's not how I just know in my gut that's not how you lead. That's not how you motivate
Uh-huh.
people. It's not, it just, there was misalignment there. So the
Yeah.
opportunity to start my own business was really an opportunity to do it the way I felt was right, to establish an organizational set of core values that were aligned with me and my core.
Mhm.
Because as leaders, if we try to live in an ecosystem that is untrue to us, our organization, our customers, everyone will see straight through it. I think that's a
Right.
recipe for disaster.
I've seen some people try to do that and maybe try to fool themselves in the process. And it works for a while. I mean, I think that's the problem with it. It works for a while. But then it ends up like maybe it turns into a health issue, or maybe it turns into exhaustion, or maybe it turns, all of these things. Like we have to ultimately be true to ourselves, or else whatever that thing is in us rebels.
Mm-hmm. No
Yeah.
question.
Yeah.
No question. And it's building my business definitely took its toll. And
Mm,
I sort of, wore this badge of honor that I never missed a single swim meet or gymnastics practice or anything of our daughters, but was I really fully present?
yeah.
I was physically there, but I wasn't as emotionally connected and present.
Did
Um,
did you ever hear about that from your daughters?
no, no, it's really just been my own internal awareness that's come
Yeah.
since that. I didn't realize how absolutely myopic I was in my
Uh-huh.
thinking and in my life, so tied into this business and what we were doing until it was over and I could
Uh-huh.
breathe and have some space and really reflect back and go, holy cow, like would I do it differently? Probably not,
Uh-huh.
but I might go in with a little bit more awareness.
Yeah. Yeah. So what's been the biggest learning for you after the fact?
I didn't know at the time why I was so motivated to do what it was that I was doing.
Uh-huh.
And it was afterwards that I had this epiphany that really what was driving me was to cure this incessant lack energy in my family.
Mm.
It was this, as I reflect back on a grandfather who grew up in the Great Depression, who handed all that energy to a single mom
Yeah.
who was always fearful of money and just this, and then she transitioned that to me. And I know that part of my soul's journey was to say, okay, we're done with that. We're
Uh-huh.
finished. And when I was fortunate enough to have the economic stability that I did post transaction, I was able to spread some of that around within my family to not just fix it for me, but to kind of give everybody else some breathing space.
Have they been okay with that? Because you always hear about the lottery winner who 2 years later is bankrupt, and
Yeah.
like how has that been? Because we all have this, like if you're living from a story of lack, you will work really hard to get back to lack.
Yes, absolutely. It's actually gone well.
Good, good.
The family members that I've engaged with in that fashion have been have been great. I think
Yeah.
they weren't coming from like a. I actually think it was probably mine. I don't know that
Mm,
I can say this was a familial issue. I think it
uh-huh.
was mine.
It's just the way you absorbed the story of what you saw with your mom and your siblings.
Yeah, and in a way, you could say I sort of projected my shit on them.
Uh-huh.
I mean, they didn't necessarily want or need my money,
Yeah.
but it was a gesture of gratitude for having been with me on the journey, and also a desire to make their life just a little easier.
Yeah. That's awesome. So one question I ask people who are in this kind of post-exit situation is, um, what do you want when you don't need anything? How would you answer that question?
What do I want? And I don't need anything. Probably a renewed sense of purpose,
Uh-huh.
a renewed internal drive.
Get your mojo back.
A little bit, but in a healthier fashion,
Right.
from
Right.
a more enlightened place.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. Any idea what that looks like yet, or are you still figuring that out?
My personality is to go figure it out, to
Uh-huh.
drive, 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 and go figure it out. And I'm really committed to letting it emerge, let it show up,
Uh-huh.
which is taking a lot of discipline. But it's
It's
the
funny when you say you're being disciplined about being relaxed.
totally,
Yeah.
totally, yeah. But it's also not. I mean, I think what was driving me before was kind of this. It wasn't necessarily a healthy thing,
Yeah.
and a lot of that's subsided. Like I am very happy now, and I don't feel the need that like I have to go prove myself.
Uh,
I mean, I have nothing to prove to anybody, and I think that the first chapter was definitely a you know needing to prove something to the world, and I just don't feel that anymore. So, and I also
Well,
don't see that it being like a full time, fully engaged thing. At least I don't
uh-huh.
see that right now. I've been fortunate to get involved with a few early stage companies with entrepreneurs who I really like. That's kind of been my criteria
Yeah.
is someone who I see is really working on their own personal journey using the sandbox of their business, doing work in things that are meaningful. I don't have any interest in investing in or getting involved in anything to make money simply for the sake of making money anymore.
Hmm.
It needs to be something that's rooted in something greater than that.
Awesome. What advice do you give to these entrepreneurs that you're working with now? And do they see this as their own personal journey, or like tell me how you do that?
Yeah, I mean, I just am who I am anymore. I'm super
Uh,
transparent. I don't have any issues talking in, topics of love and self and spirit and because I believe that unless the entrepreneur is really connected with who they are and if they don't recognize this organization, this entity, this living thing that they're leading as an extension of themselves,
yeah.
it's not going to be ultimately successful in all the ways that success would be measured. And
Right.
so I just really challenge them to think about their own being their best self. A lot of it is around, creating a really solid vision. I did
Hmm.
that really early, Jeff. Part of it was some of the spiritual work I was doing was around really manifesting what I wanted. And I literally wrote down what I wanted my business to look like.
Hmm.
I didn't set a time frame on it, but at the end, when we did our majority recap, I looked back on that journal entry and it was almost exactly what it was that I had envisioned.
Wow.
I told the story of my team a bunch of times about when I started my business, I rented this little garden level
Uh-huh.
basement office
Basement. Yeah.
and it had a door outside the back of my office. It had a little crack under it. So in the wintertime, it was just freezing cold on the floor of this office in Fargo, North Dakota. And I had space heaters around. And it was kind of a tomb. There wasn't a lot of daylight. And I just was heads down on my computer. And I remember sitting there thinking, man, someday we are going to be in Denver. We're going to have a beautiful view of the Rocky Mountains and we're going to have this prosperous, growing company. And sure enough, in 2014, we ended up moving the business to Denver, rented this spectacular office space in the Denver Tech Center with a view of the mountains, and it came to fruition. So I'm a big believer in really, really getting connected emotionally to what it is that you want, because the power to manifest that is we're powerful beyond our own awareness.
Yeah. One of the things I love to tell people is, who say, well, I'm not creative or I'm not powerful or, it's like, no, you're so powerful that you can create the illusion you're not powerful. Like that's how powerful we are.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Was it Marianne Williamson said that it's like we're most afraid of our greatness, something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this is beautiful. I'm really looking forward to diving into this more deeply with you on September 17th. Thank you for
Cool.
being
Yeah,
willing to put this together. We can keep
for sure.
talking, but I'll turn the recording off.
Yeah, I actually have an appointment I got to get to at 11:30, so I got a
Okay.
few more minutes.
Yeah, I got a couple minutes too. Okay, I'm gonna, whoops, I almost turned off the